Today's show is all about making the switch, as it were. Making a switch from eating that standard Western diet that's high in fat, high in calories, high in the risk of leading an unhealthy life, and making a switch toward a healthier lifestyle, one that is filled with a cleaner diet, a healthier diet, and a healthier lifestyle for sure. And one of the men helping to lead that switch for us is indeed the CEO and co-founder of Ruby and now Swich, Mr. Joe Girard. Joe, thank you so very much for being here, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Chuck. It's great to be here.
True or false, you through Ruby, which came out in 2005 and now Switch more recently, have reached 1 million students, give or take, in 180 countries already?
Yeah, we were early players in the online cooking education. So we actually launched our first site in 2008. And we do a lot of professional cook training in, I think it's 3,500 or 4,000 hotels now in 5 languages. And it's been a really fun ride.
For those who aren't yet familiar with Ruby, and we will get into Switch, but I think you got to know one to kind of understand the other a little bit. What is Ruby?
So Ruby is one of the leading online culinary schools, and it was created because we wanted to provide basic foundational cooking education to people all over the world that wanted to just improve their skills, to improve their health. And so my other co-founder, Don Thomas, she and I are both professional chefs. And when you go to culinary school, you learn techniques and cooking methods and like how to use a pot and a pan and hold a knife and apply heat and develop flavor. And you don't learn recipes. You learn the techniques to execute a recipe. So, we felt at the time that the Food Network was one of the fastest growing cable networks. Cookbook sales was one of the top 3 categories of all book sales. Everybody was hungry for recipes and trying to learn to become better, but they were all learning the wrong way. They weren't learning like chefs learn. So we thought, let's capture a professional cooking school curriculum, which we did over about 8 years. And let's democratize access to that content to reach people all over the world. They just need basic cooking education. It's like breathing. Everybody should learn how to cook. So that's what we did.
That is really cool. You're teaching fundamentals more so than actual recipes. And where do you think that people go wrong? Like you were saying, so if you just give a person a recipe, not necessarily the best way to get them maybe on that course for a healthier life or get them better in the kitchen long term. So why is that?
Well, I think recipes are amazing resources, particularly for inspiration. But if you think about a method in a recipe where it says, brown the ingredient in a pan, or stir fry, or saute, or chiffonade, or these are all techniques that require some competency. You need, for example, when you're browning something in the pan, to know how to heat the pan to the right temperature, what that looks like, what it sounds like when you add the ingredients to the pan. So they're simple things that anybody can learn. A 5-year-old could learn a lot of these things, but you need to understand them. If you don't know how to heat the pan properly and know when to add an ingredient into that pan and you do it at the wrong time, then your success is going to be hit and miss, and you may steam instead of saute because you got the wrong temperature. So just understanding those fundamental nuances, those auditory and visual cues to cooking are really, really critically important to the whole process. So then methods become easy. You can execute any recipe if you know how to heat the pan properly or add an ingredient, or chiffonade, or saute, or stir fry. So learn those fundamentals, just like a doctor learns medical procedures, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't operate without having the basics.
Yeah, and I would think that it also would make somebody more inclined to continue their culinary adventures in the kitchen if you teach them these fundamentals, because it gives them confidence. They know what they're doing. And maybe then it becomes even more fun for them to go in there and play around and adapt these recipes and make healthier versions of them.
That's the goal, Chuck. We got to make it fun again. A lot of people think it's a chore and it's overwhelming, and it doesn't have to be if they just take sort of baby steps to make improvements in their technique and their skill.
So let's flash forward now to 2020, just 1 year ago, and let's talk about Swich, which has a plant-based focus. So how does that differ from Ruby? Is it just the plant-based twist?
No, there's a couple of other things. So we moved into offering plant-based courses. I'm 100% plant-based, but I wasn't before. I'm a French trained chef, so I eat a lot of animal products in my career, in my history. But when we were developing plant-based courses for Ruby, we thought we need to live it. So Dawn and I both went plant-based for 30 days and watched the documentaries and talked to doctors and read books and learned way too much and never went back. And so we launched a couple of really amazing courses. One was with Forks Over Knives. So we partnered with them and we powered their online cooking school. And the other was with the Plantrition Project with Dr. Stoll. And we developed a course called Culinary RX. So both amazing curriculum-driven courses where people can start and finish. I think there's 60-day courses. And there's a short and a long version for Forks. But what we learned over the last 4 or 5 years is we really looked at where people disengaged, right? So we get a pretty good completion rate on those courses. And what we learned is that everybody is uniquely different. They have different level of skill. They have different food and flavor profile preferences. And so rather than deliver the same curriculum where everybody starts at the same place, they have to cook the same recipes, we said, let's find out where they're at in the kitchen, in their skill level, and what kind of foods they like, and what they need to learn, and then recommend content to them, and they build their own curriculum. So that's the big change between Swich and some of our other wellness offerings at Ruby, is that this is what you come in, it's kind of a blank slate, right? We ask you some questions, we learn a bit more about you as you interact with the content, and then we recommend stuff and you build your own path. There's no start, there's no end date. You can take it one day a week, one day a month, one day a year, it doesn't matter. You're not going to earn certification, you're not going to become a professional chef, but you're going to hopefully become a really competent home cook and preparing really delicious foods.
And the other component that I like to switch is that you encourage doctors to actually prescribe this to their patients, and likely for the very reasons you were just talking about. You see these documentaries, Forks Over Knives, What the Health, and you see the statistics up there. And that's when that light bulb starts to go off in your head, like, oh my God, I was eating that and that was doing that to my body. I can't be having that anymore. No, 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 no. So when you make that connection of diet and disease, it really does kind of light a fire under you to make some changes. And now you're implementing this you're trying to get doctors to prescribe this to their patients. And we'll be speaking with one doctor in just a little bit who is doing just that. But how important is it to you to get this into the hands of doctors so that they then can pass down this knowledge to their patients and get them going, eating this healthier diet?
Well, I think it's really critically important, especially for healthcare professionals that have recognized that I need to somehow convince my patient, my client, to actually change their diet to improve their health. And I think what we've learned over the years is, in our quest to drive longer term behavioral change, not short term, here's a 30-day cookbook or a recipe program or a meal kit. You need to help people develop skill so that cooking becomes fun again, as we already talked about. And I think that the challenge for a patient that is trying to transition to a healthier diet is they lack the basic intuition to do so. So they might have their 3 or 5 or 10 dishes that they know how to make. They've made them hundreds of times. They know where to buy the ingredients in the store or what aisle those ingredients are, and they can almost do it with their eyes closed. But then all of a sudden they're faced with this challenge of using different ingredients and using different cooking processes that they're not familiar with. It's very, very overwhelming. So we really try to convince people to step back, take baby steps, right? Let's just do 1 dish a week, 2 dishes a week, 3 dishes a week, and we'll help them understand how to steam an ingredient properly and then flavor it so that it's really delicious. And they go, okay, this is really good. Now I know how to steam ingredients and I can make them taste really great. So now I'm going to move on to stir frying, and we can take it baby steps together. So I think for doctors that are really trying to help their patients transition to diet, we're here to be a resource for you to help you do that, because you don't have the time to do that. You may or may not have the skill to do that, but we do. We've trained cooks for 15 years now online, and our staff have been training for decades beyond that combined. So let us help you is basically, what we're trying to do.
So often a patient will be prescribed this ambiguous diet. You need to eat a healthier diet, right? But the doctor doesn't understand much more beyond that. And that's why you're getting this vanilla diet, as a patient. And that can be quite frustrating. What has the reception been like for those doctors who you have been working with so far with Switch, as far as the program and the fundamentals that they too are learning themselves along with their patients?
Yeah, it's interesting to see that how many healthcare professionals actually realize they might have thought they were great cooks, but then when they start looking at certain things like, hey, I didn't really know that about steaming or sautéing or stir frying. Even in the professional chef category, we've discovered that. So, I think the reception's been really great. I think a lot of healthcare professionals that have decided to, maybe change their practice to more of a functional lifestyle medicine practice with a focus on food as medicine, they don't have the tools to help people carry this through, right? So they suggest books or documentaries, which are great resources, but there's no skills development site for them to recommend to their patients. And so we're hoping that we can really help those healthcare professionals and their patients make a successful and long-term change to more health supportive foods that taste amazing. That's the key, right? You need to know how to prepare them so they actually taste good and they're not vanilla and bland and boring.
Yeah. That's just it. Nobody's going to eat anything that tastes cardboard. That to me
Right.
is just not sustainable. Have you heard from any healthcare professionals who have indeed recommended this to patients, and then the patients give them feedback like, yeah, this is really helping me optimize my health? Have you gotten that kind of feedback yet? I know that this is still kind of a new program, so just wondering where you are with that.
Yeah, we had a ton of feedback on the RX and Forks programs. RX was a Prescribe program as well, so we've had thousands of doctors and healthcare professionals from a variety of different fields that have recommended this to their patients. And it was in part with their feedback on personalization that Switch was even created. Switch is relatively new. It's still in beta. It's only been up for 4 or 5 months now. We have, I think, 53,000 people on the platform now. A lot of them came through healthcare professional, prescribed solutions, and so I mean, we're hearing amazing things so far, and we're learning more and more every day. And I anticipate. I think there's about 5,000 or 6,000 healthcare professionals, so about 10-15% of our users are healthcare professionals checking it out, I think doing their due diligence before they start doing wide distributions to their patients. But they're doing a handful of patients, and we're getting really good feedback from all of them.
And if there is somebody who's listening to this right now, a healthcare professional, and wants to bring this into their own practice, what steps do they need to take?
Well, we always recommend going through and trying the product yourself. So you can go to swich.com. And there's no T in Switch, so it's SWICH. Sign up just like you were a patient, and I would actually treat it like you were a patient. So answer the questions that a patient would answer, and we'll ask, I think it's 7 or 8 questions up front to assess skill level, food and flavor profile preferences. One of the questions that we'll ask a friend is, are you a healthcare professional or not? And if you say yes, then you will get the Prescribe feature on your dashboard. And then it's really simple from that point. If you like what you see and you think your patients will benefit, you click the Prescribe button, you enter first name, last name, and email address. It sends an invite out from you with a personal note, which you can customize. And that's how simple it is. And you start building your, basically an internal client list of people that are using Switch, and you can correlate. At this point, we're not collecting any health data. We're not HIPAA compliant at this point, so we're not collecting any data from patients, but certainly healthcare professionals can correlate health outcomes in a doctor's office with people that are actively engaged on Switch, and we think they're going to see a really big change in their diet and their health and their KPIs.
Just the concept that you have put together to help healthcare professionals pass this on to their patients so that they then can take these tools and help create a healthier life of their own. I just think that is absolutely fantastic.
Great. Well, I hope it can help.
Oh, I think that you can. I absolutely think that you can. Joe Girard, thank you very much, my friend.
Thanks, Chuck.
Time now to chat with a gentleman who has perhaps the coolest job title we have ever had here on the exam room. I think that if I had a business card and it read Chief Culinary Officer, I could quite possibly be the happiest person on the face of the earth just on that title alone, let alone the fact that the job itself is as cool as the title sounds. And so let's bring in this man right now. He is the Chief Culinary Officer for both Swich and Rubin. He is Mr. Ken Rubin. Thank you so very much for being here, Ken.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
What exactly is it that a Chief Culinary Officer does? Is it, in fact, as fun as it sounds?
Oh, it's a whole lot of fun, and I've got just an amazing team that I get to work with. So my role is really about helping to ensure that the work that we do at Swich and Rubin really kind of has these culinary standards intact, that we're talking about the right things when it comes to food and the food systems and cooking and eating. So much of my work very specifically focuses on the types of products and experiences that our students have when they come to learn with us, and really making sure that we can meet them where they are and find the very best ways so that we can take their knowledge, their skills, their confidence to a different place, to a place where they feel more, more self-reliant, more autonomous, more able to make decisions. And for some people to really find health, to find some pleasure in cooking, to find some fun in sharing food, and to create those deeper, personal connections with food that make it more meaningful.
Oh, I love the fact that you said food can have a deep personal connection, because food can, in fact, be our best friend, at times, really our only friend. And so I love the fact that you're hitting on that connection there. You mentioned standards, though, when it comes to these recipes. What are the standards that you have for Swich and Rubin?
Yeah, so many of our areas of focus within Rubin is really on providing types of instruction that get people actually cooking. So we have lots of types of videos, lots of activities. So for example, we'll have recipes of various types. We'll have cooking instructional videos that might focus on a particular type of approach to cooking. So something like a no oil saute, or how to make a vinaigrette without oil, or how to roast vegetables, or how to check for doneness. These sorts of things that are more method and technique oriented versus recipe oriented. When you go into Swich, as an example, all of our recipes are also plant-based. So we focus very much on getting people to increase their consumption of those foods. We know that regardless of dietary preference or type, that is oftentimes the major hurdle for people to get into a healthier mode of eating. So when you come to Swich, it's really about identifying kind of who you are, what your needs are, and then giving you some really delicious, vibrant, attractive, colorful, plant-based options to kind of dig in, to begin to explore. And then from that, we can launch off and begin to learn other things. We can learn that you, for instance, might have a certain flavor preference, that you like spicy food, or that you like food from a certain part of the world. And that can also help Swich begin to hone in and, kind of personalize the content that you're experiencing just a bit more. So our goal is to really, create that space for people so that when they do make that decision to eat more fruits and vegetables, to kind of explore plant-based, part of what we teach on Swich is the ability for you to actually understand the underpinnings of cooking, so that you're not dependent on recipes, number one, whether there are recipes or someone else's recipes, but also so that you can find great success and great joy with anyone's recipes, with your grandmother's recipe box, with the recipe from your neighbor who you really like, but you don't want to cook it the exact way that she cooked it. So part of our goal is to really create the ways to empower people so that they feel more free, so they can go out on the open web and find recipes that might sound good, but make it work for them in their own home, whether it's because they have a certain preference or because they have a certain health need, those sorts of things.
Thus the name Swich, as in you're switching out some ingredients. You're switching the way that you eat. You're switching your diet, correct?
Yeah, you're making some changes and you're modifying it. It's not that you're going to all of a sudden stop eating or stop having fun with food or stop wanting to share food. You're just making those changes so that you can be on a better pathway. And that's really kind of where we want to step in.
I'm so thrilled right now to be joined by a physician who, in my opinion, is really helping to shape the future of healthcare. What it is that he is doing is nothing short of extraordinary, and I'm so excited that he's here to tell you all about it and how it ties in with Swich. He is the medical director and co-founder of the Wellness Garage, and with that, we welcome Dr. Brennan Byrne to the exam room. Thank you so very much for being here, sir.
Hey, Chuck, it's great to be here.
I'm so thrilled that you are here, and you are here on a day where in the US, we just had some major news break right before we started to record, and that is the recommended age for colorectal cancer screening dropped from 50 to 45 years old. And the task force that made these recommendations said it was because of the alarming trend that we're seeing in a rise in the number of cases of people who are younger and younger. And as we know, so many of these cases can be preventable. And I know, Dr. Byrne, that really goes to the heart of what it is that you are doing with the Wellness Garage and Swich.
Right. It unfortunately it's part of a trend that we're seeing, right? It's so many of the diseases that we treat in primary care are diseases of lifestyle, and it's a mismatch between kind of what our bodies want and evolutionarily we're designed for, and what our current kind of lifestyles are. So, what we're seeing with earlier onset of colon cancer in younger and younger people is just that cumulative effect of poor diet, lack of fiber, processed or ultra processed foods, but we're seeing it across the board. We're seeing it. Type 2 diabetes used to be called adult onset diabetes. We no longer call it that because we have pediatric clinics specializing in type 2 diabetics for kids. It's part of what's happening in our world. I think it's a real indictment on our food system, to be blunt.
No question about it. And as a doctor, I would think that it would be quite frustrating to know that if more patients were aware of the connection between diet and disease, just how much their 3 meals a day plus snacks was playing a role in their health, current day and then well into the future. It's got to be frustrating to know that so few patients are still making that connection. And I would think that also is a big part of, easing that frustration is what drove you again to do what it is that you're doing today. Right.
Yeah. And I think that, I think there's a disconnect sometimes between, things that are medical and things that are lifestyle, and lifestyle medicine really bridges that gap. And it most of the chronic diseases that face our patients are diseases where lifestyle components play an enormous role. So, really kind of the best thing that we can do as physicians is help people to align their behaviors in such a way that it really works with their bodies. What we see in our practice is people reversing chronic disease by changing the way they eat, changing the way they move, decreasing stress levels, improving their sleep. And the changes that they make, while they're challenging, they're not earth-shattering. They're fairly simple. But the profound transformation of people's bodies and health is really something to behold. As a physician, it's humbling to see this because you prescribe a medication and the lab result improves, but the person's whole being doesn't change the same way that when you take somebody and help them go to a whole food diet, a whole food plant-based diet. That you see, right? And you see people very much, becoming, having more energy and feeling better and mood improving and, chronic disease markers, retreating. It's really something to behold as a practitioner. And I kind of feel like I have one of the most fortunate practices doing what I do, which is really helping people that want to make change.
But let's say that the patient is ready for change. Let's say that they're
Right.
tired of living this unhealthy lifestyle. Let's say that they're ready to tackle these chronic diseases that have been plaguing them perhaps for years. Let's say, though, that this is a primary care physician who doesn't necessarily have an office quite like yours at the Wellness Garage. Let's say that this is your standard physician, and they are interested in getting involved with Swich, which does teach these healthier habits like you and I have been discussing. How would a prescriber go and recommend this for their patients? Because I know that it's being done. Even if you go to the Swich website and you scroll to the bottom, Dr. Byrne, you scroll to the bottom, there is a little link there for prescribers, and you see these dietitians and doctors who have sent this out to dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of their patients. So how does one go and get involved in this?
Yeah, I'll tell you how we do it. We put it in our newsletter. We just make it available as one of the resources and send people the link for it, and they can download and do it. Swich is a really cool app because in our change model, we look at kind of four big things, right? So there's the knowledge, and then there's the skills, and there's the environment, and there's the application of that. A lot of people have a lot of knowledge, right? So we often find that at the knowledge level, people actually have more knowledge than perhaps we would think. And so the knowledge gap can actually be closed relatively quickly, right? So that's usually not the problem. One of the things that we see as we start moving people to whole food diets, and especially trying to encourage more plant-based diets, is people often don't have the skills, and Swich really fills that, right? It's just brilliant from the standpoint of giving people helping them learn how to make tasty plant-based food, and tasty is key, because at the end of the day, I know we like to say food is medicine, but we sure don't want food to taste like medicine. So so Swich fills that role really well, and I think they've done a fabulous job in terms of gearing it towards people's knowledge levels and having it learn along with you, and the more you do, the better you get with it. But it's part of that change process, and when I can get somebody to use it and make their first recipe on it, and it tastes great, they get inspired. They want to do more of it. What am I going to do next week? What am I going to, what's coming? So I think it's one of the key tools in the toolkit.
And for the prescribers who are listening right now, and they're like, wow, that sounds like a fantastic idea. Literally walk us through the process of how you introduce this to your patients. Is it just as simple as, hey, go download this app and have fun with it? Or do you take the time to explain it? Like, really, how does a prescriber go and incorporate that? Can you walk us through?
Yeah, so we'll generally do it in the context of, we're seeing somebody, and we're recognizing that there's a gap. So we do a questionnaire that we call a wellness quotient that actually quantifies people's behaviors as well as symptoms, and it gives us a pretty good indication, and especially paired with the blood work, gives us a pretty good indication of what's going on for them. And then we come back from that. That tells us kind of where they are in the wilderness, so to speak. And then we come back to them with here's some things that you can do to improve that. So, moving people to whole food approach is probably number one on the list for most people. And encouraging them to eat more plants and more plant-based meals is right there alongside that. So really from there, we then say, we assess, is this something they're going to be interested in? And is there a willingness to try this? And generally, when there's an interest and willingness, people will they'll give it a go. And really from there, it takes off by itself. So what we don't do is prescribe it like medicine, where you have to take this, you have to do that. By and large, people just won't do it, right? So it's kind of getting them to the place where they realize this is something that it's going to make them feel better. And guess what? It's actually going to be fun, and they're going to learn a bunch of stuff. And it really is neat to see people who are not, really haven't paid a lot of attention to their food, all of a sudden start doing recipes and developing skills and getting better at it and getting engaged in the Swich community.
And you mentioned skills a number of times. You use that word, and that's the cool thing about Swich is that, yeah, there are recipes on there, but it is also teaching a person how to take their own recipes and really modify them and make them as healthy as possible so they can still enjoy their favorite foods that they have been for years, just much healthier versions of them. And whether it's eating a plant-based diet or anything else in life, I think a lot of times when we have apprehension before making a change, it's because we aren't familiar with what it is that we want to do. And here's Swich kind of laying out how, to go ahead and make that change and start from the ground floor and work your way up. It has to be kind of cool for you as a doctor to see the confidence grow in these patients who were willing to dip their toe into the water and then wade out a little bit deeper and a little bit deeper in this process and get healthier along the way.
It's incredibly gratifying. I often joke with people, the cure to physician burnout is have physicians work in lifestyle medicine clinics, right? Where you see this change. And back to the skill part of it, the game changing part that Ruby and Swich bring to this is actually helping you at things you don't even know you don't know, right? So I remember the first time I did one of the Ruby courses, and I didn't know how to use a knife, right? And so I never liked chopping, vegetables because I didn't really know how to use a knife. It was kind of a pain, and there's a little video on how to use a knife properly, and that was a bit mind blowing, right? How some little skill like that actually makes a difference in your own world. So, one of the things I think for physicians and anyone who's going to prescribe this is, download it yourself and just start doing stuff and figure out where you are. And, for a lot of us, there's things we don't know. And then once we fill that in, you start to get that joy of learning where it's like, okay, I didn't know that. Now I know how to do that. And now that I can do that, there's this whole other world that's open to me. I love some of the videos just on like roasting vegetables properly, something as simple as that. But showing you some tips and tricks there. So there's just some really fundamental stuff that's built into it. And what's nice about it is it's small bites, right? So you don't, it's not like you're locked in, an 8-hour program trying to figure out kind of what you're going to take home from it. It's these little 5-minute bites that, who knows, the recipe that you're doing may call for a technique you've never even heard of. And lo and behold, you learn it and that opens up the world for you. So I love seeing people discover that, but honestly, it probably comes back to, I enjoyed doing it myself too.
I love the fact that you just admitted on the show that you didn't know how to use a knife at first. Are you a culinary whiz now? Are you in there, doing the rapid fire chop?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a culinary whiz by any measures. Again, kind of one of the things that's fun with lifestyle medicine is we're all in the same boat, right? So it's not like I stand on a pedestal and I've got it all figured out, right? I'm out there trying to figure out my path, right? And I'm trying to figure out what works for me and what doesn't work for me. And, I've got different genetics than others, and I've got different factors that are playing into that. And so I got to find the best path for me. And that takes work. And every day, you get up, you got choices to make around kind of what you're going to eat, what you're going to do for movement, and, how you're going to manage your stress, and how much you're going to sleep at night, and how time for relationships, and are you fulfilling your purpose, and all of that every day, right? And so we're really all in the same boat, and I think that what becomes fun with this is, especially in our group medical stuff, people start to, people that are on the path start to lead, they start to find things, they start to show things, and we all learn from it. And so that I think is it kind of flips things around in medicine, I think, quite nicely.
And the feedback from the patients who you've turned on to Swich, largely positive, I would assume, correct?
Yeah, it's been overwhelmingly positive. And I think, I think it's like everything in this attention economy, right? It's just, it is another app to pay attention to. So, I think that, it's kind of reminding people about it and trying to get people to build it into their routine. Um, we had this one patient who I spoke with a couple of weeks ago, came in through one of our programs, and she she's actually lost. So she came in with a BMI of 30, and no real chronic diseases, but a few kind of definitely red lights on her blood work. Her BMI is now 20.5, and one of the things that she and her husband did was they started doing 2-week meal planning, and so they would actually sit down and they'd go through kind of recipes, and they weren't doing it on Swich, although they've started to use Swich. But what they did with this was they also set kind of a goal that every week they would try one new recipe. And so they weren't plant-based, but they've started to introduce more and more plant-based cooking to it. But what they did do right away was they eliminated all the takeout food and all the processed food and all the junk food that may have been coming in, and just planned these meals really well. And then every week they add new recipes, and some weeks they'll download a recipe from that we might have recommended, and some weeks it's a winner, some weeks it's a loser. They don't like it, but you kind of look at that, and what a great pattern they've gotten into. And then the thing I love about it is, the woman was in our program, her husband wasn't in our program, lost 34 pounds, just simply by they're doing the same thing for eating. So I think that this is a fabulous tool for people that want to do that, right? It really kind of gives you unbelievable set of recipes. I love the feedback from people that have done it, so you kind of get a sense of the recipe there. You put together a meal plan, you try new things, and it really, I really think it can become part of your habits.
Absolutely. You speak so glowingly of Swich, and you have these success stories. You know that it's effective. And I think that other providers who are listening to this right now are probably saying, yeah, you know what? Why don't I give this a go? And the cool thing about Swich is this is an absolutely free app. So, I mean, what do you have to lose? In all honesty, what do you have to lose?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it was easy for me to come to it because I know Joe and Don, and their heartfelt passion around what they're doing comes through in what they do, and it is it is just a beautiful contribution, right? So you kind of can't believe that it's all free, and the amount of resource that's there, and just the video quality. They know what they're doing. I mean, Ruby's a culinary school. They're teaching some pretty high-end chefs. So they know what they're doing when it comes to teaching. But they've really broken it down, I think, for people that don't have all those skills to actually start to climb that skill ladder a little bit. Because there's nothing more discouraging. Let's be honest. When you download a recipe that's quote unquote good for me, and you cook it in such a way that it tastes horrible, right? Like it's very defeating on multiple levels. So this kind of shortcuts that, and so it becomes a great resource for people.
No question about it. And you've learned that firsthand. You went from not knowing how to use a knife to being a master chopper. So, Dr. Brennan Byrne, we got to leave it right there. But I want to thank you so very much for your time today, my friend. And just congratulations on everything that you're doing with the Wellness Garage and with Swich. I think that it's absolutely fantastic. And I truly hope from the bottom of my heart that this is the future of healthcare.
Thanks so much, Chuck.
If you feel like you've raised your health IQ by a couple of points, go ahead and subscribe to this channel and leave a nice comment below. And to hear the entire interview, head over to Apple Podcast or wherever you get your shows from and subscribe to The Exam Room by the Physicians Committee. And please leave a 5-star rating.